Thank you, Maverick. There is a really delightful little collection of stories in between the creation and the introduction of Abraham. And these stories are sort of these prehistoric tales. They are a part of our identity. Our family tree is rooted in stories like these. In many ways, being a person of faith is a simple matter of identifying a set of stories that are your stories and resonating with those stories and identifying with those stories. And so we're going to talk about stories for the next 4 weeks in this series that we're calling All in the Family, stories of Genesis in between Eden and Abraham. We're calling it All in the Family because this is our family story. It's like sitting around with family, either given or chosen, and telling stories. And in these stories, in the retelling and the remembering of these stories, we remember who we are as well. They make us who we are. And now, as I was thinking about these stories, I came across the quote that is featured in the litany that we read a little bit ago, with that one line, "We tell stories in order to live." We tell stories in order to live. And I just find such a profound yet simple truth in that statement. Why do we tell stories? We tell stories in order to live. I love to imagine these stories of Scripture being told over and over again before anyone thought to write them down. You know, there were generations where the stories of the Bible were just told from one person to another, from one generation to another. Grandma, tell us the story about the snake again. I want to hear that one, right? Grandma, tell us that story about the rainbow in the sky and how that got there. That's what I want to know. And these stories would just be told sitting around a table or a campfire or wherever it might have been, over and over again for probably hundreds, if not thousands of years before someone even bothered to write them down. There's an author by the name of Yuval Noah Harari whose book is called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Has anybody read Sapiens? It's a children's version of it. Dave Bierce has read it. There's a children's version of it as well. What's that one called, Aaron, that children's one that we're reading to Gabe? How Humans Took Over the World, which is a really fun one for kids. So his basic idea is that what sets sapiens, our species, apart from literally every other animal is our capacity to tell stories. He says it this way: the truly unique trait of sapiens is our ability to create and believe fiction. All other animals use communication systems to describe reality. We use our communication system to create new realities. There's a whole organization dedicated only to telling stories. Have you heard of The Moth? How many of you have heard of The Moth? Yeah, it's a beautiful organization. The Moth, their only mission is to promote the art and craft of storytelling. This honors and celebrates our diversity and our commonality in the human experience. The Moth was founded in 1997 by a guy named George Green, and he got the name, fascinating story about how he got the name, The Moth, right? So as a kid, they would sit on the front porch in the evenings and tell stories as it got darker and the sun went down. And of course, the porch light's on. And what's attracted to porch lights in the evening? The moth. And so as he was listening to stories, he was watching the moths fly around the light. And so he created this organization called The Moth, and all they do is tell stories. It's just people getting up in front of other people telling stories, true stories, true as they remember them, stories. It's an amazing thing about stories. They're told. They're not explained. I am a preacher, and so my temptation is to just explain everything. But that's not how stories work. They speak their own meaning. Even when that meaning might be difficult to understand or difficult to hear, like the story we heard a little bit of today, it's a little bit difficult to hear. It's got some meaning that's kind of convoluted. It is It is layered with generations of church teaching around the story of the eviction from Eden that aren't necessarily in the text, but nevertheless they're in our minds because we've always been taught that's the meaning. That's how it's been explained to us. But sometimes the story just needs to be told, and the meaning just needs to emerge. The story was likely told in response to somebody's question, but the story seems to sometimes raise more questions than actually deliver answers. So I've taken this story, as I've taken all 4 of the stories in this series, and I've sort of retold them. And as I share my version of these stories, I just want to offer this caveat. In no way, shape, or form do I intend my version of these stories to be accurate to the Bible. So with that said, and if it's going to be a problem for you that my version of the story isn't accurate to the Bible, our next worship series will be different, I promise. But for these 4 weeks, I'm just going to offer sort of my version of these 4 stories and let them sort of speak to us. And so this is just my revision of the eviction from the Garden of Eden. She sat in her favorite spot, high on a hill, in the shade of a big oak tree. The grass here was soft, thick, perfect for sitting. From her hill, she could see the whole garden blossoming beneath her with color wildly manicured by the hand of the Creator. It was ideal. The air was neither too warm nor too cool. She was not hungry. No muscle of her body ached. Ideal. She hated it. And at the same time, she felt great shame for hating it. She would never tell Adam. What would he think of her if he knew? What if he knew that she was certain there must be more? What if he knew that she liked to imagine what it would be like to live out there across the mountains, away from this perfect garden? What if he knew that she sometimes liked to dig in the dirt and wonder what made the garden grow? And maybe she could... What would he think of her? Because she knew, you see. She knew exactly what would happen if she were to wonder these things out loud. And she knew exactly what would happen if she tried it on her own. She would die. The Creator had said so. The garden was life, and out there was death. So, she kept her thoughts to herself. There was no one she could really talk to, so she talked to the snake. Now, before we rush to any judgment here, let's remember that none of us have ever been in Eve's predicament before, and if we had, then who's to say that we wouldn't also have talked to the snake, or anyone who seemed to be listening. So hush. She said, "It can't be death. My heart wants to be there." The snake eyed her. He flicked his tongue. "It's just that I have these ideas that there's something else to know. The garden can't be everything, can it?" The snake flicked in her direction again. "There must be something over there that's... what would it even be? Not the garden, I guess." "Yes, that's it. That's just the thing. I want to know what the not the garden part is like." Flick. "But what if I die?" What if the moment I taste the air of that new place, it is poison to me? What if it is pain to walk on that other soil? What if I get cold or hot or I get hungry? The snake turned his head around and coiled himself more comfortably in the grass beneath the tree. Flick. Am I to understand from your body language that you are not against the idea, my dear friend? She said to the snake. Flick. Well then. And she went to speak with Adam. Adam, husband, she called his name. He turned to her and smiled. Eve, my wife, partner of my life, where have you been? I've been on the hill, Adam. I have been thinking. Adam looked at her intently, leaning forward to hear. She breathed deeply before going on. Adam, there's more. There's more than this. She froze. Adam froze. The moment was full. And then Adam smiled, and he laughed. Oh, Eve, you do not know how relieved I am to hear you say that. I've been thinking exactly the same thing for a long time now. I was just too scared to tell you because I didn't know what you would say, what you would think of me. Eve was stunned. Then she smiled too, and nervous laughter followed his. Smiling, she stretched out her hand to him. He took her hand with his own, and together they went back home to get themselves ready for their journey. And it was there that the Creator found them as they were gathering their things together, preparing to go. What are you doing? The Creator asked. What is this? Adam looked up, startled from his work. Beside him, Eve put her hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, we were going to tell you. He looked at his wife and she nodded. We are going. We are leaving the garden to see what's out there. Out there? Said the Creator. Oh, my children. The Creator sighed, and then thoughtfully, out there. Adam stood straight, seeking some glance from the Creator's eye that would reassure, comfort, ease the tension. No such glance came. The Creator's face was set and stern. Children, life out there's hard. The animals out there will not be your friends. It will be very difficult and even painful to have children out there. The land will not just give you everything you need like it does here in the garden. You will have to work and work hard. You will sweat and you will cry and it will hurt. You will make your own decisions out there. You will take your own risks. You'll have to build things and invent and create something where there was nothing before. The Creator's voice trailed off. The expressions on the faces of Adam and Eve caught the Creator's attention. Their eyes were bright. Their shoulders were back. The slightest of smiles turned the corners of their mouths up. Seeing them there, so bold, so confident, the Creator knew that the time had come. All of the warnings would do nothing to dissuade their ambition. They were no longer fit for Eden. One last thing, my dears, said the Creator. Once you leave our garden, you may never return. When she heard this, Eve's breath caught. Adam gasped aloud. "No," said the Creator. "Just as your own children, Eve, will never return to your womb, you will never return to my garden. It is no longer right for you to be here. You must go. So that you may live, you must go and never return." Adam turned to Eve. She smiled. He nodded. She squeezed his hand. They were ready. The Creator sighed. Indeed, they were ready. So soon. It seemed like only yesterday that they were. "Here, you'll need these." And the Creator gave them each a thick wool blanket. It can get cold out there from time to time.